I'm so proud to welcome Trinity to the stage.
Thanks so much, Beth, and welcome to Oley. This is also my first Oley Conference, so I'm so excited for this week. My name is Trinity, and I'm a registered dietitian, I'm a Paralympian, and I am also a home TPN patient. So today I'll be going over a few different things. I'll start with a snapshot of my journey, really just focusing from May 2024 to February 2025. I'll talk a bit about identity, especially adding on to what Trip was talking about and Beth elaborated on, the ups and the downs of life on nutrition support and that duality, as well as goal setting and overcoming obstacles. So when I get started to talk about May to February, I want you to think about how you would chart the ups and downs that I'm sharing, as if it were a line graph, where it goes up, where it goes down, and anywhere in between. So to start with in May, in 2024, a little over a year ago, I was in Brazil and I was competing at the Pan American Championships. And when I was there, I won 2 gold medals and 3 bronze medals in wheelchair fencing. And yeah, it was a great competition. I was having the time of my life and doing pretty well at the thing that I love doing. By the time we got to June, I started off the month in Vancouver, Canada. I was presenting at a conference about clinical trials. And then from there, I flew to Europe with my coach for a month-long adventure. And it started off in France with a few training camps and a competition. I actually ended up winning a satellite World Cup, which was a smaller version of the World Cup. And then from there, I was in Paris for a little bit, and then flew to Spain alone by myself, totally impossible in TPN, by the way, for another conference. And that was great. I got to present at this conference with one of my best friends. I came back to Paris, and by then it was July, and I flew over to Warsaw, Poland with my coach for a World Cup. And this was a senior World Cup, and I placed 5th, and it was the best result that I've had so far at a World Cup. And it was the last competition that I had before the Paris Paralympics, and this was the boost that I needed to be able to go into it and really do the best that I could do during that competition. When I got home after that trip, I was definitely exhausted. It wasn't easy on my body. It wasn't easy for anyone around me. It was a lot of packing, and it was a lot of spending time doing medical stuff that I didn't want to be doing. I wanted to be out enjoying my nights. I wanted to be out at dinner with friends, but my night routine took 2 hours, so I couldn't just do that or brush my teeth and go to bed. It took a lot more than that. But once I got home and rested, I was officially announced to Team Canada for the 2024 Paralympics, and this led to some pretty cool media opportunities, some fun interviews, and some really neat photo shoots. By the time we get to August, I took a little bit of time off from training to go to New York City with my best friend, who I actually met at the Children's Hospital. We were roommates about 8 years ago. And I saw my favorite soccer team play in New York City. And then I came back home, and I left for the Paris Paralympics. Once I got to Paris in September, I attended the opening ceremonies, which was possibly one of the best nights of my life. It could only be topped by the days that I actually competed, which were definitely the best days of my life. I placed 5th in one of my events, FA, if you're familiar with fencing, and that was the best result that a Canadian had ever had in Paralympic fencing in history. So it was an amazing day and great to set that record. I smiled the biggest I've ever smiled in my life, and I had so much fun. Once I got home from Paris, it was October, November, and I spent a lot of time resting. A little bit of time cuddling with my cat, Quinn, a chunky little cat, and spent a bit of time outside as well. By the time we got to December, I went to Toronto to visit one of my best friends, and I also received my Team Canada ring. And every Olympian and Paralympian for Team Canada receives a ring, and so for me it was really special to receive this ring that really showed what I did and was just a way to really exemplify how I achieved my goal and that I'm able to wear with me, so it was very special for me to receive that. In January, I was finishing up my last clinical dietetic internship. I was working in nutritional psychiatry. I was enjoying some really fun outdoor adaptive sports that were nice and local to me. I went skating and downhill skiing, and I also got my first tattoo, so it was a pretty fun month to just be a normal person. Back to February, I went to Brazil again. It's a pretty common theme. If you do wheelchair fencing in North America, you'll be in Sao Paulo a lot. And I won my first medal at a Senior World Cup. That was a pretty fun podium. And the time that we were there also aligned with Carnival. So it was a ton of street parties. And even though I was only in Brazil for 2 nights, was able to spend some good time with some good music and good people and just enjoy myself. And so that was my May to February. And so if you were charting along in your head, it might have looked like this. A little bit of a peak, definitely Paris was the highlight. After that, more resting, and then it pretty much evened out. But overall, a fairly even journey. But in fact, this is what the path actually looked like. And you might not have been able to guess this or tell this because I really only showed you the highlight reel and not the behind the scenes of what was actually going on while I was training, competing, and recovering from the Paralympics. So now if we actually pull back the curtain and spotlight a few times during that journey. So if we go from May to July, I was traveling across 3 continents and also doing a lot of airport TPN setups. I was doing the whole thing with a 14 French NG tube, which was not very fun, to say the least. So I felt like when I was fencing, anything anybody could do, I could do better, and with a NG tube for drainage. So it was a bit of a confidence boost there. And then I also ended up getting a peg placed in July, 2 months before the biggest competition of my life. Went through this procedure, and I wasn't able to fence, and I wasn't able to move for a while afterwards. It definitely had my coach a bit nervous, and me a lot nervous, but I ended up getting through it, even though it really wasn't easy. If we flash forward to October to December, it looked like it was a lot of good rest time and well-deserved after the Paralympics. But it was also time in the hospital for 7 weeks because of liver-related TPN complications. And when your hospital room looks like this with all those coloring and pipe cleaner crafts, you know you've been there for too long. So I was there for some pretty intense treatments and still haven't returned to my baseline from before then. And so it's definitely showing the ups and the downs of life on nutrition support. And if we're gonna really focus in on a specific day during the Paralympics in September, it was the best day of my life. I had a record performance, and I was connected to TPN the whole time, connected to IV fluids, connected to a drainage bag. I was in pain, and I still needed to do meds. None of that stopped just because I was competing in front of 6,000 people. In front of the whole crowd during my 4th bout of the day, the referee decided that I was not allowed to fence. Why? Because I was connected to too many tubes and lines, and he thought that it was medically unsafe. This man who had seen me fence for months prior, connected to all of the same things, decided that this was the moment that, you know, I was not doing well enough to fence. We ended up needing to bring the head referee down and a bunch of officials. Eventually, of course, I was able to fence, and I won the bout against the number 2 ranked fencer in the world. So I think I proved him right. Next, I'm a bit flustered in some of these pictures here, because before one of my last matches, my peg tube drainage bag disconnected from my tube, and so my stomach contents leaked all over me. My pants, my cushion, I was soaked. I couldn't do anything about this. There was no time to run to the washroom, and so it was just me, fencing, pretty soaking wet, which is a pretty niche experience that I don't think many other people have experienced on this stage. It wasn't until after the next day, that I told my coach. He didn't even know that that was something that I was dealing with. It was a tough day too. When I was done fencing, I had to do a lot more interviews after a day that was already mentally and physically challenging. I needed to speak to media in English, and then whatever I said in English, I had to say again in French. And also then when I went out to celebrate with my family, friends, and coaches, I couldn't eat, and that's a huge part of social experiences. So it was a really good day, and it was also a really, really hard day. And this experience taught me a really important lesson, that even when I'm sick, I'm in pain, or connected to TPN, I can still have good days. And these two things can be true at the same time. And this might really resonate with you, or you might need to draw some other parallels in your life, like how you can really care about someone and also find aspects of their personality kind of difficult. You can be independent and also want or need help. You can be struggling and also smiling, but also life can be hard and painful and also really worth living. The good doesn't take away from the bad, and the bad doesn't negate the good, and both can be true and valid at the same time, and that's really what my experience in Paris taught me. It was really hard for me to reconcile this for a while because I felt like I was really stuck between two identities, or even more than two. I was a patient, I was an athlete, a student, and also a healthcare professional, and I felt like I constantly needed to choose just one identity. At the same time, I felt like I was too sick to be a Paralympian, but yet too athletic to be sick. And it was these two sides of the sword that, regardless of what I wanted to do, I felt like I was too much of one thing to be the other. And this was a really tricky place for me to be. In first year of university, in one of my courses, read this book, and the moral of the story was that having a mixed identity is an identity. And regardless of your identities and whatever intersections they cross, two sides of a sword, whatever identities you share, it's still one sword. And so having that identity is still something that's valid and just as important as someone who might feel like they're only an athlete or only a healthcare professional. You still share so many identities regardless of the parts of your life because everyone has those diverse experiences. And now that we feel like we know each other a little bit already, allow me to give a bit more background on myself. So I grew up obsessing over the Olympics. My 8th birthday party and everything onwards was Olympic themed. I always stayed super active in biathlon, water polo, cross-country skiing, and triathlons. Being active was a huge value of mine. But when I got sick, I lost this part of my identity, and I felt consumed by the part of me that was sick. But I always wanted to get back into sports. Eventually, once it became pretty evident that the Olympics was not exactly in my future, I had to adapt my goal. And so my new goal became the Paralympics. And to make it here, I had to identify a few things that I needed. I needed a good coach, I needed the financial support, I needed my family to be behind me, I needed equipment, training partners, and training opportunities. I needed to get a lot stronger because I was not doing too hot before then. I needed to qualify for the games too by going to lots of competitions. And I needed to make some health decisions. I needed to switch pharmacies for my TPN. I needed to change things around so that I could do what I wanted to do and achieve my goal. And so everybody has different individual goals. It might not be going to the Paralympics. It might be focusing on family. It might be having kids. It might be advocacy, professional work, anything of the sort. But to find what matters to you and aligns with your values is important in your goal-setting journey. And so this really aligns with the stage of desire. If you have a goal, you need to want to achieve it. And to be able to do this, you need to make sure that it aligns with your values. If you don't know what your values are, start there. And so once you have that desire, it's really important to use as your motivation to overcome obstacles. And so there's a few questions to really determine how important your goal is for you, and this will determine how much you're really willing to give to get to your goal. And it might be different for everybody and for every goal.
Another key point, especially when you're living with a chronic health condition, is the adaptability. And so for me, that was making the shift from the Olympics to the Paralympics. And so for you, whatever your goal is, I find it really helpful to develop 3 scenarios in your mind for how you're going to get there. The first scenario, the dream, the pie in the sky, if everything went your way, this is how you would achieve that goal. The second scenario, what you would like to see happen, what would be totally reasonable. And the third scenario, the absolute bare minimum that you would be okay with. You don't need to communicate these 3 scenarios with anyone, but use them to set expectations for yourself, to understand where you can compromise, and really what you're willing to do and adapt to see what your goal can look like and how you can enjoy that process. Enjoying the process is key. If I, at the last moment, didn't make it to the Paralympics, I needed to win one match and I lost it for something totally out of my control, possibly. If I didn't make it to the Paralympics, would I have resented my coach? Would I have thought, oh, these last 3 years were not worth it, I was wasting my time? No. I really, really enjoyed the process. I met so many friends, traveled to so many countries that I never would have traveled to otherwise. And I got to move my body in ways that I really enjoyed. And so making sure that you can enjoy the process, regardless of the end goal, is something really important for you on your goal-setting journey. And then, whether you're a healthcare professional or a patient, collaboration is a really key point here. You are not on home nutrition to be held hostage. Every healthcare provider wants to see you thrive, with the caveat that sometimes their idea of getting you to thriving doesn't align with yours, and sometimes their idea of thriving also might not always align with yours, but they do want to see you thrive. And so to collaborate with your team to achieve your goals, you need to communicate with them so that they can know your goals. If you don't tell them what you want to do, they'll never be able to help you get there. So to be able to effectively communicate it with them and find a way to make it happen together, understanding that there will be compromises. For me, my first competition for fencing was in Brazil. It wasn't in my hometown, it wasn't in my home province, it wasn't even in my country. I had to fly 10 hours to a different continent just to compete. And when I went into TPN clinic before then, I told my team, hey, I have these flights booked to Brazil. I'm going there to compete, with or without you guys helping me. And might not have been the smartest way or the safest way, but we made it happen, and we made it happen safely. And even if that looked like maybe I didn't account for the altitude and the heat, and I didn't bring enough IV fluids, my team sent a prescription down to Brazil, and I ended up getting some IV fluids from a hospital down there, and it worked out. And so being able to collaborate with your team and knowing that the goals that are important to you are also goals that are important to them. And along your journey, you will face obstacles. They are inevitable, regardless of your journey. But depending on your obstacle, you are never able to control what it is, but you can control how you react to it. And the actions of your reaction can fall into one of 2 categories. Either you bounce back, and that's the growth mindset, or you stay in the negative state and just fester there, and nothing really ever comes out of it. And so what the growth mindset looks like is if you face an obstacle. Let's take, for example, on my path to Paris, I had meningitis for a second time. And some people totally would have seen that as a reason to just quit and give up. Maybe, it's not for me, I should just focus on school. But to take the time to prioritize yourself, whether that's medically, mentally, just doing the basic things that your body needs you to do, instead of saying, hey, this went wrong, I'm not going to connect to TPN tonight, I don't need to do feeds because everything just sucks anyways. That's not the way that you're going to grow and adapt from the situation. It means seeking help to get better. For me, I had to take breaks from fencing for weeks at a time because of my mental health, and that's okay. So seeking that help to get better instead of pushing yourself to do things when you know you can't do it is another really healthy way to grow from situations. And adapting your approach. It's okay to rest, and it's okay to adapt your goal. and take control of the controllables. You cannot control the situation, especially situations to do with your physical health, but you can control what you do with it, and you can control your mindset about it, especially in the sense of taking care of yourself. In terms of perseverance, everybody here probably hates being called resilient, probably hates having to persevere through things that we shouldn't have to persevere through. But when you have a goal that you really want to achieve, it's okay to rest, and it's okay to fail. If it's a goal that's really lofty, it's okay to fail at that goal. But just giving up because it's too hard is really not an okay reason. And it means that it's okay to take time off, it's okay to prioritize your health, and it's okay to adapt your goal to your situation and change it, depending on how your values change. I'll leave you with a quote that I've always really liked. I've had it up in so many hospital rooms from the time I was in pediatrics. And it's a quote by an author, Cheryl Strayed, and she said, "You don't have a right to the cards you believe you should have been dealt, but you have an obligation to play the heck out of the ones you're holding." So you don't have a right to the health that you have. You have your health, like it or not. A lot of times we don't like it. But you do have an obligation to make the best out of what you have and to really focus on your quality of life and your values and do what's important to you. And so in summary, I'd like you to remember that two opposing things can both be true. You can have good days and bad days, and those two things can also happen in the same day. When you want to set a goal for something that you want to do, you need to have the desire, the adaptability, and you need to collaborate with your team and other key players. And finally, obstacles along your journey are inevitable, but how you react to them is within your control. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone here. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your week at Oley and have a great time, and whatever goal that you want to achieve, I know that you can do it, even if you have to adapt along the way. Thank you.